Thank you. Thank you for the honor of speaking. And Rod, I don't want to draw on your remembrances too much. I'm not going to tell the war story, but I want to relate from my own experience. I never knew that Randy Richardson was in the war. Now, there are a lot of people here that knew him better than I did, but I spent a fair amount of time with him, socializing. Never heard him mention the war. And so as you recounted the exploits, it's even more remarkable than I knew. And I say this because my own father, who died in January this year, was also in the war. He served in the Army Air Corps, and he served under Patton. And I didn't know my whole life that he had served in World War II. Never knew. And in fact, it was only 3 weeks before he'd passed away when I finally asked him directly, bluntly, it's kind of like the Last Supper, what did you do? And he told me. Now, I don't know what it is about that group. I'll probably never understand it. So-called greatest generation. And of course, Randy upheld that tradition, and so many other people, I've recounted this story, said they didn't know their dads were in the war until very late in life. It's really quite remarkable. So, I think that the service in wartime and then later in peacetime of a Randy Richardson is really, it's about heroism and it's about bravery. Not only on the battlefield, but the things he did in civilian life in virtually supporting the conservative movement all those years were full of the same values of bravery and valor. I mean, as I listened to what people said and I read some of the notes that were emailed to me, I myself served a short period of time on the foundation board. It is a remarkable achievement. And we forget sometimes, not all of us, but we forget in the 60s and the 70s, being a conservative was not a very easy thing to be. And actually, lately, I feel it's not such an easy thing to be. And that troubles me. And that's why it's so fitting that we're here to honor Randy Richardson, who was intrepid in his support. So, returning to the war, and Rod, this group, our soldiers, the greatest generation, they defeated Nazism, they defeated fascism, ultimately they defeated communism, ultimately they changed the tide and the hinge of history, and ultimately, in their wisdom, decided that they wouldn't talk about it. And it's something to think about. Truth is, I'm not sure I get all that. Not just honoring Randy, but even my own father. Here's what I know. People like that, who fought for their country, people like that preserve freedom, they preserve the godly values, the responsibilities, and the culture, and the perseverance, and the Western traditions that make life worth living. I think that's part of the lesson. And I think the greatness of Randy Richardson is that among his many, many achievements, in his soul, deep in his soul, lie those same virtues and values, because you don't do that sort of thing unless it's deep in your soul. A couple of other personal points. My pal Chris Demuth said he was a New York intellectual. Chris, who had the adjacent office to me in OMB during the Reagan years, Chris is always right, but I must say, I saw him more as a kind of old-style Southerner. I really do. Maybe that's because I'm a city boy, but he's an old-style Southerner. And, I think Randy possessed all all those manners and morals of the old-style South. Of course, we know throughout history the South is not always right. The South had a few ideas that weren't very good, but they also had some very good ideas and a way about them to respect others and be kind. And I think that was Randy Richardson. I think he was a kind man with impeccable manners, and I think he got that from his Southern tradition. And finally, one thing I also discovered in doing a little research, Randy Richardson, pretty good painter, as it turns out. Pretty good. I'm married to a painter, to an artist, so I was kind of interested in that. So I made phone calls or two. He sketched people, sketched scenery, loved to be outdoors doing it, and he liked beautiful things, not abstract, expressionist nonsense. He just liked beautiful things, which is the essence of good painting. So I guess when I look at Randy, I want to see one of these pictures. I want my wife to see one of these pictures. But I can remember another guy who believed in freedom, spent his whole life working on it, and fighting against the tide when nobody would listen to him, who was a pretty good painter, Churchill. So I came up with a ranking, especially for this memorial service. I'm going to rate Randy Richardson, along with Winston Churchill, and my saintly bride, as the three great painters of that time. Now, he was a voracious reader, as other people have said. He loved to talk, and he liked to talk about events. I think it's true that he didn't like to talk politics so much, because his reason for being in life was not Democrat or Republican. It was the spreading of great conservative ideas. But he loved to talk about stuff. He sat around, and it was great. Now, in those days, I was a practicing economist, Wall Street guy, and Randy was in the market, I guess. He loved to talk about the market and the economy. And he knew a lot. In fact, one of the things I discovered, he knew, I think, as much or more than I knew, even though I was doing it for a living, and he was just doing it for the hell of it. And I really enjoyed that, sort of a Renaissance man about him. Anyway, I'll just say, speaking as a Reagan supply-side guy, speaking as somebody who believes fervently in free markets, and someone who believes in free societies, and someone who believes in the virtues of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I just am honored to be here, and I want to thank Randy Richardson. I'm indebted to him. I'm indebted to his character. I'm indebted to his knowledge. I'm indebted to his bravery, and I'm indebted to his virtues and his values. May he rest in peace.